Recording?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I brought my charger, so we'll just put as much on there as we can. It might stop because the file gets too large or whatever. Okay, guys, so let's talk about today the four main paths of yoga again, and we'll talk about Patanjali Yoga more specifically. Remember that page that we read in the book that had the 40 different kinds of yoga? Page 38. Go to page 39. So those are relative, those are like really getting specific about types of yoga that are just in India. Most people in our United States haven't even heard of most of these kinds of yoga. But the point was that there's not just one kind of yoga, but they all are trying to lead towards the same goal, which is eradication of the ego and spiritual enlightenment. So more specifically here, I usually teach the four main paths of yoga: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga. I usually just talk about those because you can't go into all of those different kinds of yoga so far. Karma Yoga, do you remember what kind of yoga that was?
Yoga of action.
Yoga of action, yes. And what do the people who do the Karma Yoga do? Altruism. What else? They serve others, giving, and they're very practical. They build schools, they try and feed people, they're trying to really help people. Very practical. Selfless service, correct. Okay, now Bhakti Yoga, what's that kind of yoga? Bhakti. Devotional love. What do those people do in their practice? Chant mantras, what? Worship a guru, find a guru, or a deity, yes. Worship something bigger than them, yes, correct. Lots of rituals, love, expressions of love. And then the Raja path. Do you remember about that one? The Raja path, what does that mean? Starts with an R too. Raja, royal path, yeah. Who was the founder of this? There's a guy whose name starts with a P, Patanjali. And what are they saying? How are they saying you practice yoga? Asanas in there, yes. You have a progression of disciplines, observances. You clean up your act a little bit in terms of moral behavior first. Then you get asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, finally samadhi. So there's 8 limbs. There's 8 steps to it. So it's for practical people. It's for people who want to meditate, practice asana. That's why we've embraced it mostly in the West, because we love asana. So we got stuck there a little bit. And then Jnana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, what's that?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. What kind of wisdom? Like how to repair a Mercedes-Benz, that's wisdom. Does Jnana Yoga care about how to repair a Mercedes-Benz?
No.
Why? What specific thing does it try? Awareness in relationship to, and in God, and awareness in relationship to
All things.
all things, and also including in all things. Me, you're you, what you are, you. You need to know your relationship to all things, God, and awareness. You need to know that. Do you know it? Damn it, I thought I had you guys on the first weekend. Yes, you know it. What is it? What's your relation? What are you in relationship to? Awareness. Your awareness, that you know everything through that awareness, all seeing, remember all those exercises we did? You can't know anything outside of yourself, so you already are oneness. That's God, that's love, that's unconditional freedom, that's liberation, samadhi, goal of yoga, union, okay? Don't make me go all the way back into all that stuff. Okay, now take a look in our book. Go to page 40. This lecture on Raja Yoga. Tiffany, why don't you give it a try on page 40 there. Read that paragraph starting at halfway on page 40, Raja Yoga.
The designation Raja Yoga, meaning royal yoga, is a comparatively late cognac that came in vogue in the 16th century. It refers specifically to the yoga system of Patanjali, created in the 2nd century, and is most commonly used to distinguish Patanjali's Eightfold Path of meditative introversion from Hatha Yoga. Raja Yoga is also known as the Yoga Darshana, view system of yoga, and classical yoga. Patanjali's own name for his yoga path is Kriya Yoga, the yoga of transformative action. It is the high road of meditation, contemplation, and renunciation, consisting of the following 8 limbs, Ashtanga, or categories of practice.
Ariana, go for it. Read those 8 limbs.
Yama, moral discipline comprising non-harming, non-stealing, truthfulness, chastity, and non-grasping and heedlessness. Niyama, self-restraint comprising purity, contentment, asceticism, self-study, and devotion to the Lord. Asana, posture. Pranayama, breath control. Pratyahara, sensory inhibition. Dharana, concentration. Dhyana, meditation or sustained and deepening concentration. Samadhi, ecstasy or merging in consciousness with the object of meditation. Together, the 8 limbs lead practitioners out of the maze of their own preconceptions and confusions to a sublime state of freedom. This is accomplished through the progressive control of the mind. Beyond the highest ecstatic state lies the freedom of the transcendental self, which is pure witness of all mental processes. For Patanjali, self-realization is kavada, or the isolation or aloneness of that transcendental witness. The many 3 selves all intersect in infinity and eternity. Enlightenment or liberation consists in simply waking up to our own true nature, which is the transcendental spirit or self.
All right, that's the paragraph I really, 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 really liked. So, the 8 limbs, they have the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. The yama and the niyama have 5 sub-limbs. The other ones just are on their own. So the first thing Patanjali says you have to do is the yamas. This is a moral discipline. And this has 5 branches. Ahimsa, non-harming. Asteya, non-stealing. Satya, truthfulness. Chastity or restraint of the sexual energies. Brahmacharya. And non-grasping or greedlessness, aparigraha. So first off, you have to clean up your act. Don't steal and have sex a bunch of times. Then the niyamas. This is the self-restraints comprising purity, saucha, contentment, samtosha, asceticism, tapas, self-study, svadhyana, and devotion to the Lord, vishvara pranayama. All right, so then what do you get to do? What's the 3rd limb after you take care of all that? Finally, you get to do asana. But did you see specifically he put in parentheses? Do you get to do asana to feel good? To heal your body? Only to sit in meditation. That was the original goal of asana in this system. So we've turned it into a health maintenance routine. But it was just one step of the road in this. So after you learn to sit in the lotus position, very still with your spine in perfect neutral position, what do you then get to do? Pranayama, breathing control. And we'll start to go into our practices of pranayama. Then, after there's pranayama, there's pratyahara. That's sensory deprivation. So what are the senses? Sight,
taste,
smell, taste,
Touch.
touch, hear, and sound. Okay? So, when in the yoga class do we kind of go into sensory deprivation?
chanting,
When?
chanting,
When we're chanting?
reading.
No, because you're aware of sound. What point during that yoga class do you try and do pratyahara where there's sensory?
Savasana.
Savasana, final relaxation. You're really attempting, you don't move, so there's very little physical sensation. You close your eyes, even cover up the eyes. traditionally there was no music or anything like that, so you tried to take sound out of it, no smell, you're obviously not eating, so that's pratyahara. Final relaxation is pratyahara. Okay, so when you do that, when you're laying there, imagine yourself laying there in final relaxation, and you have a moment where you're not, what becomes apparent when you pull back from the senses? What do you know? What do you see? What do you conclude then? Yes, you're still aware, exactly. That was good. Yes, you're still aware. You still are aware. So then, then we move on to concentration, dharana. And instead of the senses, what is this targeting? If the senses are sight, sound, hearing, touch, what's the other thing that we're aware of? Thought thinking, right? So this targets thinking. So it says, no, quit thinking and concentrate just on one thing. And that one thing could be a mantra, Om, it could be anything, really, but you just concentrate on that. And also you can just concentrate on awareness. You could just say, I'm aware of awareness, and that's meditation, very much so, very much so. Then what happens? Meditation is the natural result of taking all those steps. And then finally, you can come to 8, and what do you get? Ecstasy. Exactly. If it was that easy, wouldn't we all be doing it? So if the final step was samadhi, what do most yoga students conclude after they come out of final relaxation and walk out feeling so good? That the ecstasy is a physical high that you get, but it's not. That's not. The ecstasy is knowing what you are as awareness, because it's not something that comes and goes. The good feeling after class is just a sensation that rises and falls in the awareness, correct? It doesn't stay forever, correct? And you are aware of it when you're in it, and you're aware of it when you're not in it. So that's misleading. And that's very misleading. That took me, I would say, 10 years to unravel all of this. Because in most yoga studios, this Patanjali 8-limb yoga is the only yoga they teach. They don't teach you about karma yoga or bhakti yoga, or certainly not about jhana yoga. They only are interested in this path because this is the one with asana in it. And the idea is if you can do if you do all the first stuff right, and you do your asanas right, your pranayama right, your meditation right, then it leads to this thing called ecstasy. And everybody's really enamored by that. Who doesn't want that? Does anybody here not want that? I mean, I want it, but I've never achieved it. Not in all the 4,000 times I've practiced and meditated, and never, where is it? So that's where they say, well, no, you just have to keep going. You have to keep practicing. You have to keep. And what you realize is the ecstasy that they're talking about is the realization that what we are is the awareness that doesn't crave certain pleasurable states and really shun certain painful states, that we're not separate individuals who are that anymore. The ecstasy is the realization that we're already totally perfected as consciousness, already now. And that might lead to a physical feeling of ecstasy, or it might not. And I feel that that's very misleading in the yoga traditions. In non-dualism, when I told you guys to go on YouTube and you follow people on they're very clear on that. That's just a statement. But the yoga people are still a little bit infatuated by this teaching. And this word, ecstasy, it means something, right? It promises some good feeling. So I think that word, samadhi, I think translating samadhi as ecstasy is a little misleading as well. Would you like to live in a state of perpetual orgasm? It's not realistic, it's not happening. That's not happening. So, anyway, so then he puts this last paragraph in here, which I love. So this is what George Fierstein wrote, the conclusion paragraph here. So together the 8 limbs lead the practitioner out of the maze of their own preconceptions and confusion. Do you feel that you're in a maze of preconceptions and confusion? Do you acknowledge that? Thank you. We are. A lot of people would not. They'd say, "No, I'm not confused." Right? That's ego right there. It's just a denial. It's just lack of humility, lack of seeing things clearly. It's just a defense mechanism of the ego. Preconceptions. When I say that you're in a maze of your own preconceptions, what's another word for preconceptions?
Taboo.
Judgments. What?
Taboo.
Assumptions. Judgments.
Taboo.
Beliefs. Thoughts. Beliefs. Assumptions. Judgments. So when I say you're in a maze of your own preconceptions, a lot of people are like, what is that? But it's beliefs that you have that are getting in your way. Like, I'll give you one right now. There's a belief that you're under right now that's confusing to you, and you're better off dead than you are. You're better off alive than you are dead. Do you believe that that's true? You do, don't you? Can you know that that's true? Can you sit here and tell me, yes, I know for a fact that you're better off alive than dead? Can you know that for a fact? You can't. So it's a belief that you can't prove if it's true or not. It's just a belief. But you think it's true, right? That's a maze of our own preconceptions. Do you see how it works like that? It's crazy, isn't it? So if you step out of all of your preconceptions right now, what's left? What's left? Awareness is always what's left. Exactly. You're always, and that's what we are, and that's the end game. So look what he says about that now. This is accomplished through the progressive control of the mind. So they're saying there is a progress. Patanjali Yoga says it's going to take some time, and there's a progression, which you've got to do your asana and start meditating in order for this to be realized. But that's only in this system do they realize that, because there's two other words in yoga in terms of enlightenment, and one is called God, I can't believe I just love these words. One is called Krama Mukti. Mukti meaning enlightenment, or you see what you are. Mukti. And Krama meaning a progression. So Krama Mukti says there's a progression of understanding what you are, and it kind of always does appear that way, yes. Then there's Sadhyo Mukti, and Sadhyo Mukti means sudden realization. Sudden. You realize what you are. So in yoga, it's acknowledged it's not always a progression. There are individuals who do not undertake asana, pranayama, pratyahara, the 8 limbs. They don't undertake any type of spiritual progression. And instantly, boom, they go, oh, yeah, I see that I am that awareness. Yes, that's super clear. Thank you. And all spiritual questions are answered. They know what they are. They're done. They're finished. So that can happen. Do you guys, would you prefer that? We all would prefer it. It's easier, right? So that's considered rarer than this apparent progression. But I will point out, at a certain point, there has to be Sadhya Mukti. Because if you're in Krama Mukti and you're doing a progression towards realization, doesn't there have to at some point be the realization, the sudden sadhana? So there really is only sudden realization. But it appears that there's some kind of opening up of the mind or anything like that. So. Okay. Then he says, this is accomplished through progressive control of the mind, Chitta. And the progressive control of the mind is just the awareness, recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not personal. They're not my thoughts. They don't mean anything. They don't have any validity or coinage. They don't have any value either way. A thought doesn't, until the me thought comes in and goes, yo, this is good for me. This is bad for me. So this thought matters. You see? It's a conceptual interpretation of something that keeps us in suffering, keeps us in separation, keeps us in a maze of confusion of our belief system. Beyond the highest ecstatic state, so samadhi is the highest ecstatic state, right? Samadhi, ecstasy. Beyond the highest, there's that word ecstatic, and you look up at samadhi at the top of the page, ecstasy. So beyond the highest ecstatic state. So this is beyond samadhi, the eighth limb, lies the freedom of the transcendental self, which is the pure witness of all mental processes. Do you guys know that now? Is that crystal clear to you? What are you as consciousness? What words does he use here? What words is he using to describe the consciousness that you are?
The witness.
The witness. Doesn't it feel like that? Doesn't it? Do you see why he uses that word? If you blank out that pure awareness, doesn't it kind of feel like it's just witnessing the thoughts? It's witnessing the senses. It's witnessing the thoughts. It's witnessing the seeing. You see what I'm saying? That's why they use that word witness. It's another word for consciousness or awareness. Hey, come on in anytime you need to.
I'm going to try to get on.
So that's what he's saying. He's saying behind the highest ecstatic state, he's acknowledging is still a state that's going to come and go. It feels high and you're really high, but beyond that is the witness that's always there as your consciousness, and you'll always return to that. No matter what state occurs, you always will return to that. And the witness of all mental processes. And I would also say the witness of not just all mental processes, but witness all sensing too. The witness of all the senses. Doesn't the witness the senses as well? Yeah, that's what we are. For Patanjali, self-realization is kaivalya, that's a word, or the isolation or aloneness of that transcendental witness. Okay, so it's one way to say it's all alone, right? Isn't that kind of sad? You reached enlightenment and now you're all alone. There's nobody to share it with. You're alone, you're alone. But if that's true, that it's aloneness, isn't the complete opposite of aloneness simultaneously true? You can look at it, and maybe Patanjali was looking at like aloneness, but when you realize that you are the consciousness that is life itself, all of a sudden there's not aloneness. You're everything. You're complete. You're the completion of the complete completion. You're not alone at all. You are life itself. But in a way, you're alone. There's no Paul that's in there. You know what I'm saying? Do you know the awareness that you are? You know that you're alone in there to a certain degree, correct? You know what I'm talking about? But as that, you're already everything. You're all seeing, all hearing, all sensing, all thinking, all... So, you give up a little self and you gain. That's why certain yogis, they say, the entire world is my body. This is not just my body. The entire world is my body. See how that's true now? The many free selves. So in effect, are there many separate free selves? Are there? What is the freedom? What's the realization of the freedom? That I'm separate and now I'm free? Is it correct to say now that he's making an assumption? The many free selves. Is that even possible? Is it possible to be free as a separate self?
No.
It's not. Do you see that? The freedom is the realization that you're this oneness, that you're this... It's not a separate self any longer at that point. So this is where this George Fierstein is... I love him, but I don't think he quite understood, because somebody who realizes there can't be many free selves. There's no such thing as that. That's not what freedom is. It's freedom, the freedom that he's talking about, and all yoga is talking about, is the realization there are no separate selves. You see that? There's just the awareness that you are. There's just the oneness. There never was a separate self. We only thought there was. It was only just a preconception, a belief, an idea. So when we believe something, it seems true, right? But drop the belief and you'll clearly, quickly see that what you are is that awareness. Just drop the belief. So he concludes beautifully. Even though he didn't realize it, he wrote these words perfectly. The many free selves, Purusha, all intersect in infinity. I agree with that. Yes, that's what happens. Yes. Everything intersects in infinity and eternity. So infinity and eternity, that's what this awareness is. enlightenment or liberation consists in simply waking up to our true nature as awareness, as the witness, as impersonal consciousness, which is the transcendent spirit or self. That is it already. I think that's incredible. So, the only problem here is that he wrote that beautiful paragraph. And what he's saying is that you have to do these steps first. And in Jnana Yoga, we don't say that. We just come right to the realization. That's why what I've been teaching you in this. You don't have to do all these steps. Patanjali says you got to do all these steps. I'm saying in Jnana Yoga, no. They're going toward the same goal. Right? Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga means forcefulness. Some people also define it as Ha, meaning sun, and Tha, meaning moon. Have you ever heard that? Sun, moon yoga? That's Hatha. But I've mostly heard it translated as forceful yoga. So first of all, what kind of yoga is Hatha Yoga? What does it concentrate on mostly? The asanas. It concentrates mostly on the asanas. So why would they call this a forceful method? How's it feel when you go on that mat? Do you always want to do it? Or you have to force it to make it happen you know what I'm saying? It's like you're forcing the action in a good way. But it's different from Jnana Yoga. Would you call Jnana Yoga forceful? You're just sitting here talking, basically. It's different. All right, so all the systems that you know of yoga in this country, Ashtanga Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Vinyasa Yoga, Easy Does It Yoga, Anusara Yoga, Iyengar Yoga, Shivananda Yoga, those are all under the Hatha Yoga umbrella of Raja Yoga. Hatha Yoga is under the umbrella of Raja Yoga, since Raja Yoga is the only place where we see asana mentioned. So, Hatha Yoga. So, if I say I do Ashtanga, I'm saying that's one subcategory of the Hatha category, which is itself a subcategory of the Raja category, which is just one path of many different paths. You see how asanas, and what have we made it in our culture? Yoga, we just call it yoga, asana. So that's why in India, they're critical of us. They're like, no, you don't know yoga. Yoga philosophy all life. You think yoga asana. You know, that's, if you go to India, that's what they'll say. Supposedly, I've never been there.
Is that 40 types of yoga, like at the beginning of the book?
The 40 types of yoga, I would say that there could be an infinite number of types of yoga. Those are real traditional ones from India that I think are fairly obscure, right? You don't, like, if you open the page of the 40 types of Hindu yoga, and you read number 19, Lambika Yoga, the unitive discipline of the hanger, meaning uvula, which is deliberately stimulated in this yogic approach to increase the flow of nectar, amrita, whose external aspect is saliva. Okay, that's a pretty obscure branch of yoga. You don't like walk down the street and go, you know what, I'm going to go over to the Ambika Yoga Studio. What is it called? The Lambika Yoga Studio today. Do you see any Lambika Yoga Studios talking about the nectar of your saliva and teaching that in the West? So that's just a very obscure branch in India. Maybe some people still teach it or follow it. But I think his point in listing these 40 types of Hindu yoga is, hey, Americans, there's more to yoga than asana. I think that's his point of this. And asana is just underneath the Hatha Yoga category. Is it making sense? You guys like this? So you're seeing the big picture now, right? It's good. That's why you take the teacher training. Can you see that you can't really go this far into this in a class? In a 1-hour class or a 90-minute class? It's building on what you learned last weekend, right? The whole thing. Understanding. So think about in the 11th weekend how enlightened you're going to be. Ecstasy. Ecstatic in your life. Exactly. All right, so there's Hatha Yoga. I'll leave it at that. Hatha Yoga, skip to the middle of page 42. So these practices that they listed bullet points for, I'm reading the paragraph right below these bullet points. These practices are held to purify the subtle channels, the nadis, through which the life force, prana, circulates. When the life force is mastered through the breath, the mind is also mastered, since breath and mind are most intricately associated. When the mind is subdued, the higher practices can be cultivated leading to ecstatic merger with the object of one's contemplation. So, again, I feel that that's kind of confusing. I don't think that that's a progression. I think you can do that right now. It's not leading to this in Jnana Yoga. It's only leading to this in Raja Yoga. See how you're in his way of writing. When the mind is subdued, so when is something that happens in time? Is your mind subdued now? So what's your only conclusion? It must, if it's ever going to happen, it must be happening sometime in the future. When your mind, the higher practices can be cultivated, leading to. If something is leading to, is it complete and done? Or is it still kind of incomplete and needing some completion? So do you see how these words are already acknowledging that there's some kind of progression in the future to be more of what you are, a purer. It's talking about being a purer version of what you are, purer in a very physical sense. You know, clean up your dietary habits. There's these practices above which lead to purity. Read this one. I mean, have you heard of these? Let's just start with the first. So, Dauti, cleansing, consisting of cleansing the teeth, tongue, ears, frontal sinuses, throat, stomach, intestinal tract, and rectum. Rectal floss. Vasti, the bladder, consisting in contracting and dilating the sphincter muscle to cure constipation. Neti, consisting of inserting a thin thread or rubber tube into the nostrils.
Like a neti pot.
Like a neti pot. Nali, a technique of rotating the abdominal muscles to massage the inner organs. So, I mean, I'm telling you, if you train in other systems that only concentrate on this path, you'll be taught that these practices are something that lead to enlightenment. And I had a woman in the Shivananda yoga tradition, they do these practices. So, you take a string of gauze, and you snort it up one nostril, and cross it down the other.
Ew.
And then you're like, you clean it. Then you take another thing of gauze, not that same one. Unless you're in India and you need to conserve your life. And you wad it up in a wad, and you swallow it all the way down into your stomach, except for you leave a little string to come out. And then you pull it out and it cleans. I mean, this is how literal it's extreme, but that is Hatha Yoga, the forceful method. It's extreme. And then
what's the science behind it?
The logic behind it is if you can purify the physical body, it'll lead to realizing enlightenment later on. I do not believe that this is true at all. So I'm consistently pointing out that the logic is weird and the practices are potentially dangerous. Absolutely. And there's vomiting yoga. They definitely have the finger down the, that's how you cleanse the, Now there's some other stuff that could be used as useful. Have you heard of the neti pot?
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen it before?
Yeah.
It's in Whole Foods.
It's a little pot with a spout. It looks like a tiny little teapot. And you fill it up with warm, salty water.
Yeah.
And you tip it into this nostril. And it pours out this nostril over a sink. And it's good. It's good. If you wake up in the morning, you're like this.
Yeah.
And you're going to try to go to downward dog. You know what I'm talking about? If you're blocked and the teacher says, breathe through your nose, and you're in downward dog, it's like, good luck. Right? You know what I'm talking about? So they would use this neti pot to cleanse before they would go into pranayama. Certainly before you're going to go to alternate nostril breathing or something like that. But now we have something called the NeilMed Sinus Rinse, which is available at Walgreens and CVS for $20. Yeah, it's available at CVS and Walgreens. That's cool that they sell it there. But way more effective, way faster, more idiot-proof, and better is the NeilMed Sinus Rinse. And if you want, you can write that down. The NeilMed, Neilmed, NeilMed is the brand sinus rinse. So this doctor, a throat, ear, and nose doctor, And then it's basically a little squeeze bottle, like you have a water bottle that squeezes, you know? And it's at the top, and you fill it up with warm, salty solution. They give you the solution. And you just put you try and achieve body temperature of the water. So that when it goes in, it's the same temperature, so 98.6 degrees, or 96.8? 98.6. 98.6, you try to feel the water that you put in the faucet, put this in. Then you put it underneath one nostril, and it's made of like kind of flexible plastic, and you go like this, whoosh, and it blows everything completely out the other side. Then you switch it to the other one, and it's like you're clear as a bell.
Wow.
Clear as a bell. Then, if you want, and I used to do this, but people judge you about it. Do you know those
Strips.
the strips that you put on your nose, okay? And have you know what I'm talking about? I'll think of the name of it in a second. The Breathe Right. The Breathe Right strip. Have you seen it? Football players wore it or whatever, you know? Okay, it attaches here with a little bit of like, almost like a Band-Aid type of tape. And you attach the Band-Aid to the side of the nose. And then it has a little arced thing of plastic that then pulls this out just a little bit. Have you guys ever done this? It's fucking incredible. It's incredible how much more air goes in your nose. Nose breathing all of a sudden becomes like, oh my God. It's like, so if you do it, if you want, we can get through the one pump and then this, and then you go into your yoga practice and you'll see. The only problem is I used to wear it and people get, sorry, Paul, did you get in a fight? It looks like you're in trouble a little bit when you have that on there. It looks like you're not that healthy. You know, there's a judgment against you. You know what I'm saying? But if you want, we'll experiment with it. Because if you do that NeilMed and this, and I'm the only yoga teacher I know that knows that, your breathing will be like so much easier and fuller and more robust through your nose. And why is that a benefit? What do we now know about breathing that I taught you?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. There's just more oxygen in there with every breath that you take. So we can experiment with that. And also, I haven't forgotten, we got to get the pure oxygen tank. We can do a whole experiment. So these practices can be good. I'm not saying they're not bad. I'm not saying they're bad. But some obviously go to this extreme. And what they're saying is your physical body is toxic, and you got to get rid of that toxicity before you're enlightened. Or, you know, in a way, what they're saying is your body's toxic, and before you realize God's love, you need to clean it up. I don't like that. I don't feel that that's the way God is. I don't feel that you're wrong or ignorant. That's like the original sin. It's like you're just a sinner. You're a guilty sinner that's filthy. And until you clean up your act, you'll have no access to samadhi. Do you see how this system, it sets up, I feel, this really judgmental way of looking at our bodies that I know Emily would agree with me on this one. It's not true. Our bodies are our bodies. They're just vehicles. They're not divine instruments or anything. You know, you ever get the trots? Is that the divine instrument? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's stuff that happens in your body. It does not seem divine. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's a disconnect because in this kind of yoga, this Patanjali yoga, almost every yoga studio in the United States that you're ever going to go into assumes that this is all completely correct. And in my opinion, they're teaching this dogma, which isn't the fastest way to self-realization up here. You can use these practices in a common sense approach to achieve excellent health, and I don't want to discourage that. I think that is very, very important. But to say that you're not going to reach enlightenment or that you'd reach it faster if you could somehow, you know, swallow gauze and pull it back up and stuff like that. Now I'll show you another one, which I can actually do. You guys might be able to do it too. I can do the easiest version of the Nali Kriya.
I practiced that before. It's
You
so hard.
Can you do it?
I did it once after practicing for like a week. But
You
I
guys,
think so.
I'll teach you guys right now, okay? So it has to do, the Nali Kriya has to do with the bandhas, which I didn't teach you yet with the bandhas, and it has to do with breath retention, and we haven't covered that yet in pranayama. But it's a cleansing. And in speaking of the Nali Kriya, the practical benefit, if you were some people would be doing this to cleanse their body to lead to enlightenment. I already tried to tell you that I don't agree with that. But say you're living in India, it's 100 years ago, and you're constipated. Say you are. Say, you haven't taken a shit for a week. Has that ever happened to anybody, by the way? It's bad.
Yeah.
When I had my double hip replacement, they gave me painkillers, and they make you so Oxycontin. They gave me Oxycontin. It was horrible. Like, it was painful. I was like going to Hugo Fresh, It's like my mom was trying to take care of me. She's like, oh, maybe go sit on the. It's embarrassing. So the yoga would say, drink a large volume of either salty water or more preferred lemon water. Like a big volume, not just a little sip of water so you're not dehydrated. Like try and get mass weight in there, And then you do this exercise called Nali Kriya, and basically you pump your stomach from your belly button in and out with no air held in your lungs. So you have to exhale all the air out of your lungs, and then not inhale again, and then pump your belly button in and out and in and out and in and out. So it's basically like this. So, you guys want to try it?
Can you do it where you roll it?
I can't. That's why I say I can only do the first stage. Have you ever seen somebody roll it back and forth? It's like they swallowed a cobra. You want to try it, or you guys just ate? We'll try it later. But it's a practice we'll do. It creates heat. It works with Uddiyana Bandha. It's breath retention, which is called Baya Kumbhaka. So that's pausing after the exhale, so there's no prana in your lungs, or less. There is still some. So can you imagine if you drank like a half a gallon of warm lemon water and then pumped your stomach like that? It creates a strong peristaltic action that's forcing, using gravity and mass to force things down through the colon and out. But that particular practice can be used also not drinking the water first as a control of the bandha, Uddiyana Bandha. It's control of Uddiyana Bandha. So, I've seen people who can do that really, really much better than me. And they're not enlightened at all. They have no idea that what they already are is the transcendental self that they're seeking, and they think that if they can just keep practicing this. So do you see how my logic, I just can't see how doing that would ever lead to that. If you think you're separate, you think you're separate until somebody explains to you that you ain't separate. It doesn't come from perfecting this purifying the body. It doesn't. I just don't see the logic there. So I teach this path here because you're going to go out in the world and every other yoga teacher and studio that you're going to go to is going to be drinking this Kool-Aid. And I'm really, that's why I really love this group and love this teacher training, because I think we're going further. All right, so then you go to, here's that little paragraph that I wanted to read you guys. The bottom of page 42. Aurobindo, himself a master of jnana yoga, readily admitted that dedicated practitioners of Hatha Yoga can accomplish extraordinary feats. Yet he also asked, what have we gained at the end of all of this stupendous labor? As he saw it, Hatha Yoga makes a huge demand on the practitioner's time and energy and hardly seems worth all the effort and difficulties. In his words, Hatha Yoga attains large results, but at an exorbitant price and to very little purposes. Aurobindo's critique fails to take into account that Hatha Yoga not merely aims at health, vitality, longevity, but also at liberation, specifically liberation in an immortal body. It does not really apply to the highest traditional expressions of Hatha Yoga, although it is valid for much of its contemporary manifestations. Okay, so this was the paradigm. Do you guys remember when I alluded to this? Here's a master of Jnana Yoga, a known master, Aurobindo. And he's saying it's not really worth the effort. And you can achieve some amazing, powers, yoga powers, but at a big, big cost. And what does he say? What have we gained in the end of all of it? Then George Feuerstein critiques Aurobindo. And I completely agree with Aurobindo. I mean, I'm a Jnana Yoga person, and I realized this a long time ago. It's not worth the effort, and I'm not going to be able to make the effort. I'm not going to be able to hold my breath for 6 minutes. I'm not going to be able to do the things that it's asking to do to reach liberation. And I want liberation. So I'm going to have to look at these other paths. Then I found out about Jnana Yoga, and it's so much easier. Correct? You see what we're getting at here? It's so much easier, more direct, and you realize it's already here, it's already done. Whereas this other path is saying, it ain't done, and it might never get done until you clean up that filthy little body of yours. But then, I think Aurobindo got that completely. I believe that Aurobindo knew what he was talking about. And I don't believe George Feuerstein, I don't believe this is correct. Aurobindo's critique fails to take into account that Hatha Yoga is not merely aims at health, vitality, and longevity, but also at liberation. I think he did take that into account. He knew that that was also the goal, and he goes, it ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. If you're going for liberation, it's certainly the slowest path. I think Aurobindo knew that. Specifically, liberation in an immortal body. So what these yogis are saying is possible, and this is another big jump, okay? They believe in physical immortality. So they believe that you can cleanse yourself and then raise your vibration up so that this body never dies. Have you ever read stories about that?
That's crazy.
Did you guys ever read a book by Tom Robbins called Jitterbug Perfume? You got to read that. You got to write that down. Read it on your next long plane trip. It's about a king who achieves immortality. Jitterbug Perfume by Tom Robbins. It's about a king who achieves immortality. So he does some practices that he learns from an obscure yogi, and then he doesn't die. And what you have to do is, after about 70 years, you're not getting older. You know, everybody's getting older, and you're like, still my same old 30-year-old self. But it's 80 years later, and all your friends are dying, and you're still... He faked his own death, and then walked to another village and just showed up. And back then, there was no ID or anything like that, you know, and just started living as a 30-year-old, and then he, outlived everybody in that village as well. And then he faked his death again and had to go someplace else. So this is the idea of physical immortality. Do you believe in it? I mean, show me one person that it's ever happened to, and I'll say, okay, it's possible and it's true. But you cannot tell me you've ever met somebody like that. Can anybody ever say? It's a nice story. It's a beautiful idea and a beautiful concept. Doesn't it sound kind of cool? No, in a way, wouldn't you like it? It's kind of cool in a way, right? But again, it's just a story. No, show me the reality of it. I've never seen it happen. What's the reality of the body? Tell me the reality of the body.
It's immortal.
It's mortal. It gets old and then it turns to dirt, right?
Then the spiritual.
But the self, the awareness that you are, is the transcendental self that lives on and gets born into another apparent body. That's always with you. And people, have you ever, there's another website that you guys have to go to. It's called NDERF. NDERF. NDERF.org. Near Death Experience Federation. Near Death Experience Federation.
It's a federation.
It's a nonprofit. It's a .org. And all there are stories that are voluntarily put up on the internet. So it's not soliciting. There's no ads on it. There's not selling anything. It's purely informational. And all of the information is a result of, if you want to enter a near-death experience, you just answer a certain list of questions on that website and they post your answers to it. And everybody answers the same questions. There's 4,580 accounts. 4,580. And they all say the same thing. I hovered above my body. I was totally fine. I was better. I actually felt better. Some people liken it to when you leave your body at quote-unquote death. One guy said, it was like taking off a pair of shoes that I've been wearing for 2 years that were 2 sizes too small. So this presumption that you're better off alive than dead is not true. This perspective that you're the body and what you are dies at a certain point is also bullshit and not true. And this is not evidence. I can't call all these things on the website. That's not proof to a scientific person, because that's all what you call hearsay, right? But the people are not lying. They have spiritual experiences. They're like, they see their relatives, they see their pets. All your pets that passed away are there. Anybody that you consider to be loving, whether it be Jesus or anything, is there with you. You exist. You're whole. You're real. The perspective they all write is, this is the real world. This is our home. We're appearing to go down as separate bodies, and that's not what we are. It's not right. It's not real. Have fun if you want. Learn your lessons. Do whatever you want, but never mistake that illusion down there of separation and duality and pain. Never mistake that for your eternal essence as awareness, which is purely unconditional love.
Why don't these near-death people then want to die after?
Then often they do. There's no fear of death. They don't want to die. They're like, what happens to them inevitably is they're grooving with oneness, knowing that they're home, and like meeting their spiritual teachers and family members and pets, and they're like, the thought comes into their head, okay, do you want to go back? And it's a choice. It's a choice in their head. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. There's no authority higher than you. There's only love, no matter what you choose. And inevitably they go, no, fuck no, I don't want to go back. No way. I'm staying here with you guys in love. And the experience often comes out like this. The being is like, fine, that is completely your choice. But let me show you these pictures, these images of what happens to your kids and the people that you know if you don't go back. And they see the kids, and the kids don't have the love of their mother. And then, boom, they're like, I'm going back, instantly. And it draws you back into the body, and they're like, I went down the tube, all of a sudden, I was laying on the side of the road in a freaking car accident again, but I knew everything was okay. I went to sleep, I went into a coma, I woke up 3 months later in the hospital. It took me years to recover, I lost all my health, but I don't care. I know what I am, I know what this world is, I know what I truly am in reality, in connection to God and love, and I understand that I chose to be here from now on. And the reason is to serve, to love, to fill my roles. But I no longer think I'm on my roles. I no longer think I'm a body. So that's what these 4,500 experiences, not all of them, but a lot of them say that. And some of them, in all fairness, say, no, I was scared, I was alone. There are different experiences that some people post up there too, in fairness, okay?
That book that I mentioned the other day.
Many Lives, Many Masters. That was the first spiritual book I ever read. Many Lives, Many Masters. Do you guys read that? That's another book you should write down and read. It's incredible. It's by a scientist at Mount Sinai Hospital, a psychiatrist,
It's about Brian White.
Brian Weiss. He didn't believe in any New Age hooey-fooey. He didn't believe in anything.
It's a great.
And he hypnotized one of his patients, and his patient started to talk to him and tell him stuff about his life that he's like, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Nobody could know that but my wife and I. How do you know that? And they start saying, hey, there's more to life than science, Dr. Weiss. And they teach in many lives, many masters. So opening to this, I think is a big. It's a part of New Ageness, isn't it? I mean, but there is yoga teaching in it because yoga believes in reincarnation, okay, and it believes that there's a soul. It has a name for the individual soul called the Atman. The Atman is your soul. But in truth, really, can there be an individual soul? There's only one soul. People who follow this little story that I just told you of the near-death experience, who are yoga people, would say, okay, you woke up on the other side as your soul. Were you still an individual? And then people would say yes and no. There's a knowing of oneness. There's a knowing of wholeness, of completion. But you're also still you, what you know to be Luis right now, the part of you that knows yourself, the awareness. It's you. It's already familiar to you. That doesn't belong to anything that's separate or individual. You see what I'm saying? It couldn't. It couldn't and oneness to exist. So there's no individual souls. There can't be. So what the yogis would say is there is no Atman, only Brahman. There is no individual soul. There's only God. So that's where a New Age person would get stuck because they keep the idea of individuality alive. Even they say, I could die for my body, but my soul is still separate. You see how they do that? So I'm trying to bring you guys a little further along than that. Because the New Age people glorify the soul, don't they? But what you are as awareness is already the completion of the whole thing.
So what's the point of this life?
So what's the point? That's what the whole point. What's the point of spiritual awakening?
Learning.
What's the benefit of spiritual awakening to the separate individual?
Learning and
What?
growing.
That's exactly.
Learning and growing.
Hey, we got to go back in, okay?
Learning and being more aware.
Stop thinking for a second. Stop, okay? Just blank out. That's what we're talking about, right? Is that you? Is it what you are? Are you aware? Are you familiar? Is that you? Is it? Yeah, it is. Okay. Stop again. Notice are there any qualities to that space? Is it making any demands? Does it have any preferences? So does it need to evolve? It doesn't. Does it need to learn or grow?
Yeah.
No, it does not. It's complete. It's absolutely done. The only thing that needs to learn or evolve is a separate self. It doesn't need to learn or evolve or grow. So this is a biggie. This is a big atom bomb in your belief, in your false belief systems, the maze in their preconceptions. There is no purpose to life. There's no threat ever in any now moment. Ever. Everything already is perfectly balanced, whole, and complete. Do you see that now? But only from that perspective. Only from the perspective of awareness. Right when you go back into a thought, the me thought, there's all of a sudden, there's problems, there's good stuff that could happen, that's growth and evolution, and meaning, and passions, and desires, and pleasure, and there's bad stuff that could happen, death, pain, meaninglessness.
But in order to get there, you need to work on that. So you can't work on that unless your physical body and you're learning and you're experiencing things.
Okay, he's going for a thought. So he's saying, in order to get there, you need to work on that. Okay? So everybody stop. Just stop for a second. Stop thinking. Does that awareness need to work on itself to get somewhere? Is it trying to get anywhere? Has it ever gone anywhere? Does it ever go anywhere?
There's nothing to work on.
There's nothing to work on.
It
So
just
that's what
exists.
you're going to see clearly. There's nothing to work on in terms of reality, in terms of what's real. Remember we talked about jnana yoga, is being able to distinguish what's real from what's not real. So the part of you that's that awareness is real, and it's already complete, it's already whole. The only time you need to work on something, or there would be a progression, is when you come back into this sense that there's a separate me that needs to do something, that's a human being, that was born. You see what I'm saying? And that we call identification. That's the maze of misconceptions and Keep going. I'll ask the other question. You're on the right track with your line of questioning.
But yeah, I mean, you need to be aware of your awareness. You need to learn.
Who
So
needs to
you
be? Who needs to be aware of their awareness? You're thinking that there's a separate you that could be aware more often, right? Right? You're saying when you're identified with Louise or identified with a thought, that's the awareness is not aware of awareness in that instant, right? You're just identified with whatever is happening, right?
So what about karma, for example?
No, that is, but let me just finish my point. That is awareness itself. It's just identified awareness. It's not that becoming aware that you're aware is preferred to awareness, and becoming identified with this maze of thoughts is bad or wrong. You see that? It doesn't care. Does awareness, go into it again, does awareness care for you, that you need to change? No, as that, you already are complete. Now, did you have to detox your body or work on yourself in order to see that? You didn't have to do that, right? Melanie?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is just that it's, or how I've kind of accepted it, is that it's a realm that just exists. And it's there, and you can tap into it if you want to. But it's still there, regardless you're there or not. It just exists, and it's like pure love, and
It's a realm, but it's what you are too. You know, you are it. You are it.
But
because
I'm
you
not
wouldn't
there.
No, you wouldn't be able to tap into the realm if you weren't that. You couldn't tap into something and know something that you're not. So we'll continue, we'll move on. We'll move on. But what you're talking about is still
Is there,
that what realization is requires something to change in the moment. And what I'm chipping away is that false belief. And there is only completion in every moment. There's no more need for anything other than. And that's always true from the perspective of awareness, and it's never true if you believe you're a separate individual. See how it's all or nothing? There's no room for the ego to free itself, because the freedom is the realization there is no ego.
but that's the difficult part,
Huh?
the ego part.
No, let it run free and wild. Who cares? So that's why enlightened people, they quit being vegetarians. They have a cheeseburger. They quit judging everybody and love everybody. And they don't worry about their body. They don't worry about, I personally definitely know that a lot of yoga practitioners and a lot of people undertake all of these health practices because they're scared of death. Don't you agree? Don't you agree? I mean, they're like petrified about death, so they're like, no, I got to eat certain things, or I got to make sure there's no pesticides in this spray or something, because then I might die. And they're yoga people. That's why they're getting into these healthy practices and shopping at Whole Foods rather than Publix and pesticides. And so it's still fear of death. They're still in this pain pleasure. You know, you see what I'm saying? But when you know that what you are is that awareness that doesn't die with the body, you're like, walk into a smoke-filled room and it's like, okay, I don't prefer this. This is unpleasant. But it's not like killing my soul. You know? I mean, I want to get out of there as soon as possible, obviously, but it's not like, I'm going to get fucking lung cancer the second you smoke in here.
The healthy makes you feel good, makes you feel better.
It's pleasure. I'm not saying that that's not happening
pleasure,
every
it just
No.
makes you feel better.
What-
Eating a
I'm
cheeseburger
defining
fries and eating-
anything that makes you feel good, I'm calling pleasure. Even a happy thought. That's how pain, pleasure, in the biggest sense. There's only two things that you can have, pain or pleasure, in duality. To the me, the separate sense, that's the most important game going on in town. So that game continues. That game continues. It's working perfectly. You don't hold your hand out over a flame and go, oh, I don't care about pain or pleasure. You know, you don't pull your hand back. Because your mind body is programmed to always gravitate towards pleasure and avoid pain. That's called survival. You're not in control of that. There's
So it's all a cosmic joke.
It's all a cosmic joke. That's why they laugh when they realize there's only ever now. There's no separation ever. There is no such thing as a human being or a planet. Those are concepts and words we talked about. There's only this as it is. It's what I am, and it's perfectly balanced and whole. It's already eternal. It's already infinite, and it's what I am. So that's game over. And then the behavior continues on its own. And people who tell you that there's enlightened behavior and not, they'll never masturbate. Then when you do, how do you feel? Like a guilty sinner. You're right back in Catholic school. What were you guys going to ask over there? I'm killing you. I'm crushing. I see you guys are thinking, this is the second weekend, and we've already gone far. I feel like I've really said a lot about this already. And at the end of the course, you can say, I call John stuff that one is I don't see it still, but he's a nice guy, and he seems to take it pretty light. So I don't have to push my beliefs on you, and I don't want them to be beliefs. It can be known. You can see it for yourself, so it's not just another thought. Jnana Yoga, we'll read that later. We can talk about that enough. So, now I've got to do 120. Now I want to do something that's a little more practical for you guys, okay? Asana workshop. Now we're going to go into a posture clinic of poses. And don't even get up. You guys are not going to do the poses. Guess who's going to do the poses? Me. You're just going to watch me practice. All right, so here's the fundamentals. So open up to a new page in your book that's like a blank page and write down the fundamentals. Fundamentals of asana, alignment. Please grab me 2 blocks when you put that over. And that knee pad. Grab me that little pad to put around my knee. And a strap too. Okay, so here's the fundamentals of asana practice. See how quick we shift from the jhana right back into the practical? That's the way it is around. But now we're going to go the rest of the time, probably almost to 3, and we're going to focus on the nuts and bolts of how you guys teach these poses. So this is the way I do it. So the fundamentals of alignment. What's the number 1 fundamental of alignment that I've taught you so far? Neutral spine. To me, that's the most important thing. That neutral spine would be a possibility in every instance. Very good. Okay, what's another fundamental? What's a rule that you might have thought of for asana practice?
Breathing.
What is it? Groundedness. What's your relationship with the ground in an asana pose? What does it have to be? The way that I usually say it, you guys can just write this down directly. Whatever part of your body is touching the floor is the foundation. That's where there's weight-bearing thing. Wherever there's weight-bearing is the place where you're most susceptible to injury, because there's weight bearing on it. So that's the place that you have to have the excellent alignment. That's where the alignment has to be spot on, because there's weight bearing there. And you have to be pushing that down into the floor. You have to be pushing that into gravity in order to support it, okay? So when I do a standing, so let me think if I can think of any other fundamentals of asana. Okay, with regard to the breathing, what's a fundamental of asana related?
Through your nose.
Yeah. Through your nose when? Inhale and exhale, both. So it's not enough to say breathe through your nose, because people go, I am breathing through my nose. And my mouth. I'm breathing in through my nose out. So inhale and exhale through the nose. So that's a fundamental in terms of. All right, I'll say, throw out another fundamental here. If you feel that there's a strong physical sensation you perceive as very painful or dangerous, what should you do?
Stop.
You should stop immediately. That's called listening to your body. So, is it possible for you to have excellent alignment, be doing everything right? You've listened to the teacher, you're supported, you're pushing down where there's weight bearing, and all of a sudden there's tremendous pain. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yes, it's fucking possible. So, even though you've done everything right, get out of it, stop. But some Iyengar teachers are going to say, no, that's not possible. If you're doing it right, stay in. And you're like, you know. So, people have gotten hurt in Mr. Iyengar's class. Don't tell Elaine I said I knew somebody who destroyed their back. He had a holding cobra for like 20 minutes. Yeah, come on, it's too much, right? So, plus then he hit him with a stick.
I thought that type of yoga was the perfect posture, and that will not give you, that's just to avoid the injury.
Yes, it
And
is.
how can that injure you?
You just never know with a body what you're going to feel or something like that. You might have had some previous condition, and even though you're in the asana, maybe it's not even related to the asana. Maybe it was just going to rise up in the body at a certain time, and all of a sudden you're really in pain about something. So you got to get out of it. Now the chances are, if you're doing it all right, you're not going to feel muscle pain like that. But you could feel other pain, like joint pain or compression or some other pain, who knows, nerve pain, you know. But chances are, if you're doing it right, your muscle not going to feel muscle pain. Okay, so here's another fundamental.
So the fundamental would be, sorry to
Yeah, tell me.
interrupt you. So the
Yes.
fundamental would be not to feel pain at any time.
Not necessarily, because the sensation of muscle stretching,
Okay.
you want that, okay, right? A little bit of pain in terms of sensation you want. Muscle stretching sensation feels good, right? But don't some people call it pain?
Yeah.
Tight guys are going to be like, that's painful, that hurts. So you can't say all pain, but you have to distinguish between good sensation and painful sensation. Yes, you do. So the fundamental, I would say, is muscle stretching sensation or pain is okay. Joint pain is to be avoided. Compression of the bone pain is to be avoided. Compression of the vertebrae pain. Right? Does that make sense? Can you buy into a fundamental like that? Okay, cool enough. All right, so part of the body that's weight bearing has to have excellent alignment. We have to have the neutral spine. We don't want pain. We have to breathe in and out through our nose the whole time. And we want to stretch the muscles but not aggravate the joints and the spine. Okay, so let's start with those fundamentals. Okay, so I'll start my practice here, and I'll just, for purposes of anatomical correctness. Okay, sure, okay. So, what pose is this called? Tadasana, or also someone told us Samastiti. Correct. It's two different names, a different tradition. Where is their weight bearing? Why would this not be correct alignment? Weight bearing needs to have correct alignment. Why am I not allowed to stand like that?
Your knees and your ankles.
It's not straight. There's no, my knees, my ankles, my feet, my toes, the bones are all, the hips are being allowed to open like this. How I set my feet on the floor is the foundation, everything else. If I have my feet like this, am I going to be able to control my spine and everything? You're not, because your hips are going to be locked in a certain way like this. Your hips can't move if your feet are turned out, except for in a certain way. So the feet have to have excellent alignment because that's where there's weight bearing. So straight-footed. Should I have my feet all the way together or slightly hips width apart?
Either or.
Your own personal preference. Just be clear on what you're choosing to teach and teach that with confidence. Doesn't matter, one or the other. What body types might be uncomfortable standing with their feet all the way together?
Big hips.
If you have big hips, you're kind of like an ice cream cone like that. They might feel more comfortable like so. Or people who are overweight or something, it might feel too wobbly for them. It might feel more stable for hips width apart. So the most important part of where I have to have excellent alignment is where there's weight bearing in here, right? So then coming up with the fundamentals. What would be the fundamentals? Like I'm a person who kind of lives in a vacuum like this. Like this. See that? So in terms of putting me in neutral, what
Tuck your
Promise me.
tailbone.
Tuck your tailbone. If you can give instructions in two-part sentences. So, tuck my tailbone and what else?
Gauge your
belly.
Tuck your tailbone and engage your belly. I like that. Tuck your tailbone and engage your belly. Boom, that just fixed it. That went from me, I was like this. Then I tuck my tailbone and engage my belly. I moved that back slightly to neutral. That was it. So if you can think of two things, I usually say tuck the tailbone and draw the front ribs in. Instead of tuck the belly, I usually say draw the front ribs. Here's my front ribs. You see them? Draw the front ribs in. Tuck the tailbone. So that's what I say. Okay, so say I'm standing there, I got that. And then I'm standing like this. I'm an open-hearted yoga person. I tuck the tailbone, draw the front ribs in. But what's happening with regard to my thoracic spine around my chest area? Is it in neutral?
No. It's like put the shoulders back.
But some people told me to put my shoulders back and open my heart.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, so in terms of neutral, this is not neutral. So what do I have to do? What might be a command?
Drop your shoulders, relax.
Relax.
Relax, man. This is a little harder because what you have to do is basically the thoracic spine moves back like that. So I'm trying to force it forward like the whole lumbar. The lumbar's good. You want to force the lumbar a little forward because it's curving backwards naturally. But the middle thoracic spine is already curving backwards. It's like the hunchback. So to come into neutral, you don't want to go all the way forward with it, but you're not all the way back with it either. You just come in, and it does have to do with the position of the shoulders. So in an ideal situation, if I were going to stack my body up in terms of putting the weight over the foundation, you don't want to be too far back with the shoulder. You got to be in the middle, right? So I would endeavor to keep my shoulders kind of in the middle. Okay? So in the middle. So it does have to do a little bit of the thoracic with movement of the shoulders. But it's more like, if I were standing like this, I would still say draw the front ribs in.
What exactly do you
Still.
mean when you say thoracic? Like what portion?
That's the vertebrae in the middle, the hunchback vertebrae.
So from the middle all the way up to the top, or just?
Five. No, because up to the top is the vertical, is
Okay.
the cervical spine. Go backtrack and look at the spine picture.
So the part of normal naturally, it's like,
Go to the page, open to the page of your book in Physical Anatomy, which has a picture of the skeleton or the spine or something like that. It's under Physical Anatomy. Anybody who finds the page. 24? Okay, cool. And this is good reinforcement. What we're talking about here is neutral spine. So we're still the same. Okay, so page 24 is great. So technically, you could say that there's 5 parts of the spine. Start from the base. See that little, no, that was good, 24, that's it. See that little coccyx down there? That's the tailbone of the coccyx, right? In terms of the direction that that's moving, I know there's not a body drawn around that spine, but is that coccyx pointing more in towards the front part of the body, or is it curving towards the back?
towards the back.
No. You had a 50-50 chance. The coccyx is like this. It's tucked under. It's moving towards the front of the body. This is the front of the body. That's the front. That's the back. Sorry. So moving up from the coccyx, the tailbone, what's the next part of your spine, right above that word coccyx? What do you see? Sacrum. Are you guys familiar with what the sacrum is? It's here. It's this. It's a triangulation of 5 vertebrae. The vertebrae fuse together in the first 10 years of your life. Did you know that? Did you know that? When babies are born, the sacrum is 5 individual vertebrae, or 7 maybe. It's either 5 or 7. And that's why babies can put their foot in their mouth and their foot behind their head. They're like, ooh, they have a sacrum. So when I say it fuses together, are you aware that bones grow together and it's a most amazing process. Over the course of growing up, it fuses together into one big bone right here at your base, and that makes it so you're upright walking and life is possible. This is what gives me stability, to be upright. Otherwise, if I didn't have the sacrum, which a lot of muscles attached to, important gluteal muscles and back muscles, I'd be like, like that, like no sacrum. So this gives you upright stability. What's the next part of the spine that's above the sacrum?
Low back.
The low back, but where's the word? I'm looking for the word on the page here, and I'm not seeing it.
Oh,
Lumbar.
yeah.
It's called
Yeah,
lumbar.
cut off. Yeah.
Is it cut off? It's
It's
called
on the side.
lumbar, okay? It should say lumbar. And how many lumbars are there? 5. There's 5 lumbar. Those are those big guys. These are these big guys back here. Okay, so in terms of the curve of the lumbar, I'm really good at demonstrating the curve of the lumbar because I kind of live in this back one. So look at my lumbar. Can you see these back here? Are they curved? Is their natural curve more towards the front of the body or more towards the back? It's more definitely curved towards the front. So when I go into any forward bend and I round my back, what direction are the lumbar moving now? They're moving away from the back. So in order to bring it back into neutral, I have to put it back into its proper curve. See what I mean? Okay. So there's 5 lumbar, and then above the lumbar area, these 12. T1 through T. What's the T stand for? Thoracic. That's what I was referring to. That's the thoracic spine. And there's 12 of those. And what direction do those curve in terms of the front of the body or the back of the body? They're curved back. They're like the hunchback, like that, right? So the lumbar's moving forward, but the thoracic's moving back. Okay? And then you come up to the final part of the spine. What's the top part, the neck area called? That's the cervical, and there's 7. Think of C7 vertebrae. That's C7 right there. The bony one. Right there at the base of the neck, that's C7. Feel C7. Put your hand back behind you on your own neck. Feel this back here. Feel that one bony one, the big one? That's C7. That's the lowest of the cervical back there. And which direction is the neck spine curving in? Forward towards the front of the body or back towards the back of the body? Forward. So the neck spine, the cervical, corresponds to what other? The lumbar, exactly. So when I say, put this arch in your lower back in a forward bend, say I'm in a forward bend, and I don't have the arch, I'm rounded too much in my lumbar, and I need to put the arch back in here. Look what happens with my neck. It goes the same way. It does the same thing. So these two are connected, the neck and the lower back. They'll do the same move. But then put your neck back into neutral too. Once you use your neck to get this, because you might have to. People lift I always say, lift your chin, and that gives them this. Once you do that, tuck your chin back in and go back to neutral with the neck. Okay? Making sense so far? So that's more on neutral spine, which you could also call spinal alignment. And Elaine is going to teach you that. The Anusara boys are going to teach you that. Sharon is going to teach you that. This is not the last time you're going to be taught that. So, I organize my feet. I organize my spine up here. What was it? Is there a question? Question?
Do we need to learn any of this because the stage is not, what about the other stage?
Do you guys want to know what the question on the test, on the final exam is about this one? You would like to know that, wouldn't you?
Of course.
All right, there's a question on the final exam that says like this. Name the 5 parts of the spine, which we just went through, the coccyx, the sacrum, the lumbar, the thoracic, and the cervical. How many vertebrae correspond to each one? And the curve, draw a little sketch of the curve of the spine. That's the question. Draw a picture of it. Draw a picture of the curve of the spine with regard to the front of the body and the back of the body, and which direction the lumbar and all that curves. Okay? See how nice I am? I tell you what's going to be on the final exam, right?
Can you repeat the 5 if I don't have them even here? The
repeat the parts, yes. So this is cervical, 7, cervical, of which there's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is thoracic, of which there are 12, thoracic, yeah, with a TH, thoracic. And then this is lumbar, of which there are 5, 1 sacrum, 1 coccyx. Okay? All right, pretty good. So I'm standing in the mountain pose. It's essential that my feet be straight, okay? Neutral spine, breathing through my nose, right? You know what you're going to say. You know what you can say now. Once you know the fundamentals, you should know what to talk about in the pose, right? All right, that's what we're going to try to do. So say I'm going to go into downward dog. Inhale, raise my arms up. Okay, so in my own practice, here's what I do. I do a side stretch now. So,
Can you assist in that position?
yeah, you can. I'll show you. So I'm in a side stretch. So, what side of my spine is stretching?
Left side.
The left side of the spine. So naturally, if the left side of my spine is stretching, what's happening on the right side of the spine?
Compression.
It's compressing. And that's acceptable. What happens if you really push the compression over here? Hernias, injuries, compressed discs, bulging discs, bad things. So over here. So again, by doing this, I'm putting a little weight-bearing compression over here, right? On this side. But it's okay. That's what exercise is all about. Now, how would I name one instruction you can give me that while staying in this pose, I could take a little pressure off the pressure that I'm compressing over here? What?
Lift up.
Without totally coming out. Obviously, to come a little bit out, yes, that lift up a little bit more towards center. Come slightly out of it. But staying in, keeping the hips square isn't necessary. It has to do with engaging a certain muscle. What muscles should I engage right here to support over compression on this? Huh? You're right on the core. It's not quite the abs, but it's got to be the opposite side core here. So if I engage my right side muscles, this is like putting the brakes on so I can't go too far that way. If I engage here, then I can't go too far here without losing that engagement, okay? All right, so we'll learn more about that in back bending. It's way easier. So say I decided to do a Bikram set, and they do that back bend right away. You know they do this right away, right?
Yeah.
It's very early in the class. So I'm back bending now. What side of my spine is stretching?
Front.
No, the front. The front is stretching. In a back bend, you're opening up the front. You see that clearly? Okay. So in order to, what side of my spine is compressing? Can you see that? Can you see it right there? Like I'm just dumping right into my
Lumbar.
So in order to put the brakes on, so I don't go too far in terms of this compression, what exactly? You would engage your front core in that, the opposite, right? So if I hold my stomach muscles firm and try and lean back as far as I can, I just can't go that far with my stomach muscles engaged. So that's the brakes on. So that's how you stay in the neutral, stay in the safety. You engage the opposite muscle group that you're stretching. I guess you could look at it like that, if there is an opposite muscle, okay? Okay, so I've gone to both sides. Yes, we can learn the assist. I'll teach you that. Exhale now. I'm swan diving forward. I'm going into Uttanasana. What is this, a forward bend or a back bend?
Forward.
Forward bend. So what side of my body is stretching?
Your back.
The back. This is stretching all the back side of my body. So forward bend, stretch the back side of the body. Backward bend, stretch the front. Make sense? Forward bend. So in order to move back into neutral, what would you tell me to do in this position?
Lift your shoulders.
Arch what?
Your back.
Arch what? You can't just say arch your back because we've already just differentiated the spine into 5 different parts. Arch which part of the
cervical.
arch the cervical? That would look like this.
Your lumbar.
I really need to arch this. I need to get this back into neutral. That's the key thing. What I'm doing with my neck is not as weight bearing. It's not as damaging as this round because I'm bearing weight now with this lumbar pushing maximum towards the back of the body. And as we know, The directional curve has to move more towards the towards the front in order to move it into. So I need to go from here, rounded, to here. See how that's arched now? And then did you see how my chin came up too? Because remember, the neck and the lumbar are the same curve. But then I can reset my chin just a little bit down. Because what do I want to feel? What do I feel if I'm in neutral spine?
Less pressure.
More space.
I don't know. Your spine.
Yeah.
Pain.
Do you remember I asked you that question? Let's just so you can know. Again, sit up for just a second. Sit up for sit up. You don't have to stand. Okay. Lift your chin all the way as far as it'll go away from you. Is that neutral?
No.
What do you feel in the back of your neck? Compression in the back of your neck, okay? Tuck your chin in as much as you ever have. Is that neutral?
No.
Can you make compression in the front of your cervical? I don't know. Does it feel any pain? Most people you might not feel. The stroke gets in the way or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, now go halfway in between those two. And sometimes people have to stick their chin a little bit in. What do you feel in the back of your neck now? Nothing. Nothing. When you're doing neutral spine, it feels like there's nothing. There's no sensation at all. So it's not a good feeling, but it's not a bad feeling. You know what I'm talking about now? So that's what I'm looking for. So if I'm in forward bend, and you might say, how far do I need to go in order to correct this? I don't need to go very far. I could just go to here. Ah, done. So nice. I don't have to go, look at this. Now I'm going as far as I can. That's not neutral either. Right? You don't have to jam it all the way back, all the way. Just go halfway back. You might feel, it's not nothing in terms of your effort. You'll have to use some muscles to do this. But the feeling is that there's no compression pain at all. And it's a very nice feeling if you guys can get it. You guys just felt it a little on your neck, I'm sure. All right, so I go into my forward bend. It's like this. I got to replace the lower lumbar arch. So I usually say arch the lower back or concave lumbar or go into a back bend and a forward bend. It's a little hard to describe. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I just talk all the different words that I can. I just demonstrate it. But now you have the fundamentals, so every class we're going to be harping on that. So at least the students aren't going to be confused about what to do in a back bend. They might not be able to do it yet. They might not be able to do it. Say somebody comes in your class that's tight, and there's a tight guy, and he goes like this, and you say bend forward. He's like, his feet go apart immediately, so you got to help him out with the feet to at least get the feet straight, because that's the weight bearing. If their feet go apart, always correct that, because that's where the weight bearing is. Then they're like this, and you're like, arch your back, and he's like,
You should bend his knees.
he doesn't have any mobility back there. He doesn't have the talent, I guess, or the capacity to control his body in that way. And he doesn't have the awareness of it either. So that's why we go on these mats. You learn awareness, you learn the capacity, you increase your talent. You get to practice to be able to hold your body in this neutral position so that you can live life, less painfully. Yes.
But how could someone like that with no mobility in their lower back to even go like that, how do they even sit down?
Yeah, I mean, they're in pain all the time. They're probably hurting all the time. But that person, in my opinion, the number one exercise to teach that person, the brand new person, would be cat-cow. Can that person go like this and then kind of do that? They probably could now, because now there's not so much pull on my hamstrings. And now you can say, okay, move your lumbar. Oh, okay, I can move my pelvis a little bit. And to a certain degree, this exercise, if you go into physical therapy for a bad back, this is the first exercise they teach you, the very first one. You lay on your back, you bend your knees and put your feet on the floor, and you learn to roll your pelvis back and forth. Oh. Sorry. You learn to roll your pelvis back and forth. Make a fart. Anyway, now I'm just messing around. Do you guys know this exercise? I taught it to you, right? Did I make you do it yet? Yeah. So it's just, basically it shows you how to do this, right back here, so that when you're in a forward bend, can understand, oh, and a lot of times I teach it in that context. I make people start with the cat-cow. I show them which is cat and which is cow. Cow is like saggy back bend. Cat is like rounded, too much. Then, if you're in a forward bend, I can say, put a little more cow into it, and they'll go, oh, like that. So I use those words cat, cow to simplify it instead of saying, reverse arch your lumbar in a concave position. Just keep it, keep it simple with the cat and the cow. So that's my way of teaching. So the cat-cow exercise would be good for that person. Did you have a more specific question about that person? Do you know somebody who's really tight or something who can't sit in a chair? We're going to talk about how to modify the whole class. Right now, this is just, let's keep going, okay? Because I want to talk to you guys about the other poses that I might do in my practice, okay? So far, it's only been mountain pose, arms up, sideways, forward bend, Uttanasana. Now, I might go halfway forward, right? What's this, the cat or the cow?
Neutral.
Cow. Cow, that's the cow. It might be it might seem like neutral, but I was only giving you the option of cat or cow. It wasn't like all of the above, none of the above. Make up your own answer, Louise. Okay, now I step back to upper push-up position and I lower down, right? In terms of my alignment, where's the weight bearing now? My arms, but specifically wrists and hands, okay? So that's where I have to have the excellent alignment because that's where the weight bearing is. What does the body want to do? It wants to lift this up, this knuckle up, and put all the weight back on the perimeter of the hand and dump it right into there. And if you're a big guy, I have guys, and I see them doing that all the time. It's no problem. They have these big paws, these big meaty paws. You know who I'm talking about, those guys? They can get away with it maybe. But if you have delicate wrists, you're not going to be able to do that for the rest of your career without suffering the consequences of pain. So what's excellent hand position? How should my hands be in plank or downward dog?
Fingers spread out.
Fingers spread out, apart, like this. Do you guys see like a starfish? Yes, Shelley. Do you see how my fingers are spread apart? I can't, doesn't that seem obvious? Like when I'm telling you this, doesn't this like, why is he talking about this bullshit? This is so obvious. You're going to start teaching your classes, and you're going to see in every class I teach, people, they come in, they don't know, their hands are turned in, fingers are together, and they're doing downward dog just like that. Are my fingers spread apart?
No.
You're going to see this every single class. So don't get angry at the person. They're there to learn body awareness, even if you have to tell them a zillion times, that's your job. But the fingers have to be spread apart, and also the hands turn outward slightly. Now, how much you turn the hands outward depends on different teachers. Elaine is going to say one thing, the Anusara boys say another, but the Anusara boys are going to say that the middle finger, this one, are you guys familiar with this one? Yes. Should be straight, because that's the one that goes straight up the palm of the hand, straight up the center of the arm, straight to the center of the shoulder bone, okay? So they're going to say that one is straight. So if that one is straight, look at the direction of my index finger. What direction is it? It's slightly pointed in. To me, I never really liked that. That never felt as good. So I put my index fingers straight. So my hands are slightly more out like this. I like this one straight, and the other ones definitely stand out. To me, that just feels much better. So it's personal preference on that. Okay? Now, whatever part of the body is touching the floor, whatever part of the body has weight bearing, it has to be pressing down into the floor. So where am I pressing?
Your feet.
Well, my feet. I'm pressing a little bit my feet. That's taking care of itself. But mostly this hands, I have to go like this. I have to go from, you'll see all kinds of stuff like crazy. You have to push back. You have to press down and activate it. That just moved me much more into the pose, right? So that's where a fundamental takes me more into the pose. So the hands have to be pushing down into the floor, not just hanging out, having a great time. And they're spread out. I was in a class one time in Los Angeles, and I do this a lot. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I do this a lot because my wrists ache. And as a guy, this is just no problem to just do the whole yoga, weight bearing, push-ups and stuff on your wrists and stuff like that. So I was doing my chaturangas like that, and the teacher came by because in LA, feel like they could fix anything with yoga. And she goes, you have a wrist pain? You know, and I said, yeah. And she goes, try turning your hands really, really far out, like really rotate them out. So I said, okay. So she's talking about like this, like sideways out like that, you know? And in a way, I see there's a little bit less pain. I can go along with that. It doesn't go away. And then the problem with that is, like from here, now when I go to Chaturanga, it's like, what you're going to, yoga loves the 90-degree straight lines. So what you want, and this is taught in Iyengar, is the crease of your wrist should be parallel to the front of the mat. So if I have my hand turned too much out, the crease of this wrist is this way. If it's too much in, the crease is obviously the other way. So the crease of the wrist, have you heard that before? The crease of the wrist should be parallel to it. Okay, so I got my hands down, got to press it down to whatever's touching, particularly the knuckle, the index finger. You know, going down and down. I'm pressing my heels down, but they don't have to touch. Why is it that if there's weight bearing on your feet and weight bearing on your arms, you're less likely to get injured in your feet or leg area than you are in your arm, wrist, elbow, or shoulder? Yeah, the legs are made to carry this weight. They're built to be like, okay, you know, the arms are not, the wrists are not complaining right now to walk around and lead everyday life. But when you start to do the yoga stuff that we do, where we put the weight upside down, now all of a sudden you're using a joint here, the wrist, to hold your entire body weight up. It wasn't really designed to do that. Now you can get strong enough to do it, and that's what we're trying to do here, but you have to watch it in the process of getting strong, that you don't hurt yourself. So that's why you have to take it easy, use the excellent alignment, et cetera, et cetera. Backing up to one other little thing. Why is it then, so say I'm in mountain pose again. Say I reach my arms up over my head, and the teacher says, you have to spread your fingers apart wide in this pose. You must. The fundamental of this pose is to spread your fingers apart wide. Why is that not a fundamental, and it's actually a detail that doesn't really matter? There's no weight bearing. If I do this with my hands together, or do this with my fingers apart, am I going to injure myself? No. Very little likelihood that, whereas there's no weight bearing, that I'm going to injure myself. You see what I'm saying? Where there's weight bearing, that's where you've got to do it right. So if you're in a system, and this happens all the time, where they'll tell you to do something that moves you out of neutral spine, that doesn't matter, and that's just what their guru taught them to do. So that's why I was saying, in Ashtanga Yoga, you're taught in Utkatasana, hands together, and look up at the thumbs. Is my neck in neutral? No. It can't be. It can't be. So the fundamental in terms of healing your body, the best possible thing for the blueprint, the template of the structural, skeletal, muscular system is the neutral spine, because the energy can flow and there's no compression. So you can't tell me that this is an optimal thing to do with my neck. It's just that the guru said to do that, so everybody else said to do that, so nobody can question it. And they'll even start to explain why it's better to compress the back of the neck. That's called rationalization, cognitive dissonance. We believe what we want to believe, basically. So when I'm teaching a pose, say I'm teaching Warrior 2, after I get the person where the feet are in the right place, where the weight bearing is, what if they turn their hands palms up? Fine, it's fun. What if they do this with their arms? There's no weight bearing on any of this stuff. They can do anything. Have fun. Then that stuff is just to mess around with after the fundamental has been addressed. So if somebody says, no, you can't do Warrior 2 with your palms facing up, you'll hurt yourself. I don't buy that. I don't think you're going to hurt yourself with any of this stuff. Spread your fingers, keep them together, and all that. I think that's superfluous. You can withstand all that. All right, continuing on. So if I'm in the mountain pose, I come forward, I inhale, I arch forward. I was in upper push-up. You've got to spread the fingers. There's weight bearing now. What's the elbow to shoulder thing that I taught you the very first weekend in terms of lowering down? What's the most common mistake of Chaturanga?
The shoulders go lower.
The shoulders go too low below the elbows, and they hunch way forward. Is this neutral?
No.
I mean, is this, so you got to, at that point, you got to try to be the open-hearted yoga person and keep them back instead of overly forward like that, okay? which is hard. You guys learn that? So keep your knees on the floor, right? Make it easier by putting your knees on the floor. And the elbows are in yoga push-ups. The fingers are spread apart out, but the elbows are in. You guys are familiar with that? That's yoga push-ups. If you turn your hands in, can your elbows go in?
No.
If you turn your hands in, the elbows can't go in. You have to have your fingers a little bit out so the elbows go in. Okay? So I lower down. Then I come into upward facing dog. Is this a back bend or is this a forward bend? It's a back bend. So to put the brakes on to make it easier, what would I do? Hold my stomach muscles firm. Boom, I just did that and all of a sudden I felt less compression in my back. Does anybody really do that? No. Everybody just cranks as far as they can into upward dog. And they look way up too. So I understand about why we like that on the lower back, but I don't think you have to look up. You can just look straight ahead. So again, there's systems where they're going to be like, upward dog, you have to look up more, look up more, look up more. And you're just compressing the back of your cervical needlessly. That pose is not about cranking on your neck, it's about other things, where there's weight bearing. And it's a counter stretch to forward bend. All right, I flip it into downward dog. I want you to become aware of some terms, I guess you would call it symmetrical poses versus asymmetrical poses. What does something mean if it's symmetrical? Equal. So in terms of a pose or a body, what would be the definition of a symmetrical pose? What would that be? The left and the right side would be equal. They'd be doing the exact same thing. Okay? That's symmetrical poses. Asymmetrical poses is not symmetrical. One side's doing something different. So, name me some symmetrical poses that we do all the time. Some of the most famous poses we're always doing. Downward dog. Is this symmetrical?
Yeah.
Okay. What if I go like this?
No.
Okay, so downward dog itself is symmetrical. What is another pose that's symmetrical? Chair pose. Symmetrical. Both sides. If I drew a line straight down the middle, both sides are doing the same thing. What else? Handstand, Tadasana, plank, upward dog, downward dog. Some of the all-time favorites. How about this? Symmetrical?
Yeah.
Symmetrical things only have one side. There's no left side, right side, obviously, right?
That would be,
Let's think what other poses symmetrical. How about some of the seated ones?
Yes.
Have you ever done a class that's just symmetrical poses? Like, say you could only choose symmetrical poses. You think you could sequence a class? I mean, you could do it, but it's... Why does it feel good to go into asymmetrical poses?
because you feel how your right side develops better, or not better, but
It just
different
does.
than your right side and left side.
does. It does. Because I guess you could say because basically walking like this, is this symmetrical or asymmetrical? It's asymmetrical because there's certain moments I'm like this, So in order just to walk, you have to do left side, right side. So it feels good. So the fundamental is if you're hurt and you're trying to heal yourself from being hurt, the optimum thing is to keep your spine in a symmetrical position that's not weight-bearing overly on one side or the other. Keep your spine. So, say you're in downward dog, and the teacher says, "Okay, lift your right leg up." And just because of the tightness of the body or whatever, you start to kind of go like this. Have you seen this before? All right. Look at everything above my waist. Is my spine symmetrical?
No.
No. Now, if I can square this hip now, can everything above my hips be symmetrical in terms of my spine? Yes. So keeping the hips square enables it to be possible that your spine could stay symmetrical even though your legs are doing something asymmetrical. You see what I'm saying? That's why the yoga teacher is always imploring us to keep our hips square in the hips square positions, okay? So, say I'm doing a pose like this. Are my hips square?
No.
Now, this one's way back and open from this one. So if you were working with somebody, so is my spine, is it possible for my spine to be symmetrical in this? No, it's all over on one side and stretching on the other. Is it possible for me to be a neutral spine and not symmetrical? Yeah, it is. I can go like this. I'm not symmetrical, but I can tuck my tailbone. This is a back bend. So I can draw these ribs in. I can get my chin going. I can get my thoracic. So neutral spine is possible, even if you're asymmetrical. But it's not as desirable in terms of healing you from injury as neutral spine with symmetrical spine. Okay, that's the most supported thing that you're trying for. So if I were working with somebody who had a bad back, I wouldn't allow these asymmetrical positions to be going on. I would make them do the same pose with their hips square, and then make them do the neutral spine and just hold it there. They're not allowed to dump into this or tip over here or whatever. So in three-legged dog and downward dog and three-legged dog, it's actually two different poses. This is, I only lift the leg up to the level of the sitting bone. See my heel? It's on the level of my butt bone, more or less. My toes and knee point straight down. Some people go up even a little higher, but this hip bone, these pelvic points right here and here, are equal distance from the floor right underneath them, so that everything above my waist can stay symmetrical. If I tip open like this, it turns it into another pose, an asymmetrical pose, which is a great stretch. But all of a sudden, you have to kind of do the other side, and it's become something slightly different. Okay. So, keeping your hips square, the reason for that is so that you have the possibility of keeping your spine symmetrical above your waist, even if your legs are doing something asymmetrical. I did not know that until last year. All the yoga teaching I did, I didn't understand why you got to keep square, and it's so your spine can stay symmetrical. All right, so let's see. Maybe I can go into another couple of poses here before the hand. So I lift this leg up. One pose, the other pose. I allow both of them. I just want people to know the difference of it. By the way, when I lift up here, is my chest, so my spine is symmetrical, so my chest can be symmetrical too, right? If I go here, can my chest be symmetrical somehow then?
No.
I don't see how. I sometimes have heard teachers say, open up your leg. Now, make your chest square to the floor. You can't do that. That's an incorrect way of saying it. And also, what's happening with the hands? When I tip that hip open, like this, which hand starts to dump everything on it? This one, because I can take this one off the ground. This one's nothing anymore. So it's very asymmetrical weight bearing, which is even more dangerous than symmetrical weight bearing. Okay? This is how we're talking about injury. So how do people get injured? First of all, why are asymmetrical poses more strengthening than symmetrical poses in a certain way? Because you put all your weight under one leg. If I go like this, I'm putting everything onto the muscles of this, so that's going to upgrade the muscles and strengthen those. Okay? So that's how we do it. We go back and forth, left side, right side, with asymmetrical weight bearing in order to strengthen. So the problem is when I see people who have a hurt wrist or something, and they're being told to go into this. This is asymmetrical weight bearing on one part. Now, if you have excellent alignment, you can do it and maybe get out of the injury or something. But if you don't have good alignment, then you could hurt yourself with that, because there's not just weight bearing on that part, there's asymmetrical weight bearing, okay? I want you to understand that. It's even more dangerous. So if you go slow and explain things well in an Iyengar way, you can tell people, spread your fingers, get your wrist directly underneath your shoulder, stack your... But are we doing that in Vinyasa Yoga? You're just like, put your hand on the floor. And then I see people, just switching around without even thinking about their hands quickly and doing asymmetrical weight bearing. So that's recipe for disaster. I don't like that at all. So also, that's the same reason why, if I told you, if you were an upward dog, and your hands are too far forward. See how my shoulders are all jammed up by my ears now? And I've said this before, I say, you gotta move your hands back. Here's what they do. That was just, with weight bearing, I just slammed my wrist into the floor 6 times with bad alignment. So in that case, I just have to smile and take my really patient. They're like, am I doing it right? Oh, I'm doing it right. Okay, let's lower down to our tummy. They'll be like, what? Let's pick up our hands and slide them way back, like 6 inches back, so they're alongside the rib cage. Now let's go into upward. So I make them replace their hands when there's no weight bearing on it, and then go back into the pose. I hate that walking around with it. So if you have beginners, keep it simple, and don't expect to have the capacity to, with good alignment, do asymmetrical weight-bearing poses with your arms. Do you know any asymmetrical weight-bearing poses with your arms? Side plank, I just demonstrated. You know any others? One time I was like passing by a beginner's class. The teacher's like, okay, now we're doing side crow here. And I was like, well, how on earth are you going to, that is like the most asymmetrical on one wrist. And you know, it's like, it's not a beginner's pose. So, continuing on the practice here. I know about symmetry now, asymmetrical poses, weight bearing. Avoid, watch out for asymmetrical weight bearing poses on the wrists and arms. Those are rough. That's why I don't, this other knock against this yoga studio